You probably have been taught that ABA is the gold standard of treatment. And to motivate your child, you have to use reinforcers or rewards. I'm here to tell you there is a better way, and we're going to break it down and what the problem is with using too many reinforcers or rewards to motivate your child, and what is just a more not only neurodiversity affirming way, but just overall better way of motivating your autistic child. Hello, and welcome to Mindshaper SLP, where we help autistic individuals and their families create fruitful and fulfilling lives. My name is Rebecca Robbins. I am a speech pathologist and the owner of Mindshaper SLP. And today I want to talk with you about how to motivate your autistic child. Now, if you're like the majority of families with an autistic child in the United States, you probably have been taught that ABA is the gold standard of treatment. And to motivate your child, you have to use reinforcers or rewards. And really, that's the only tool you're given to motivate your child. Well, I'm here to tell you there is a better way, and we're going to break it down what the problem is with using too many reinforcers or rewards to motivate your child, and what is just a more not only neurodiversity affirming way, but just overall better way of motivating your autistic child. Well, let's just take it back and talk about the two types of motivation. So, motivation is the desire or the willingness to want to do something. And there are two ways we can motivate an individual, or two ways that we as humans are motivated to participate in the tasks of our life. There's extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. Now, intrinsic motivation, if you think about in your life, the things that nobody has to twist your arms to do. So for me, putting on music and singing and dancing, nobody has to twist my arm too hard to go and do that. Singing karaoke, yep, I'm on board. I love doing it. It lights me up. I'm intrinsically motivated to do it. When we have intrinsic motivation, it means that we just have this inner drive and desire and want to do something, and we don't need anybody else telling us to do it or that we have to do it. Now, on the flip side is extrinsic motivation. And this is where rewards and, I hate to say it, bribes come in. And in ABA, if your child is in ABA or uses verbal behavior, they're called reinforcers. That is when you use something external from the task or activity as a reward to motivate a person to do something. So if you think about your job as an adult, your paycheck is a form of extrinsic motivation. If your boss stopped paying you, how motivated would you still be to show up to work every day? You probably wouldn't. You would probably leave and find another job where they would pay you. So the paycheck is the reward. And that's not to say you don't enjoy your job, you don't get fulfillment out of your job. But at the end of the day, you're going there because you need the money and that's what you're working for, right? So that's an example of extrinsic motivation that happens in our lives on the day to day basis. With an autistic child, we use this a lot to help motivate them to do things that they're not necessarily internally motivated to do on their own. So, for example, especially when a child is young and just developing their communication skills, we might withhold something that they really like. Maybe they really love playing an iPad game. And I'm sure you've heard this phrase, first work, then iPad. And so we ask them to do some sort of work or learning task with the promise of, if you do it, you will get this. And that is an example of extrinsic motivation. I want to talk to you today about what the problems are with using this form of motivation primarily for your autistic child, or for any child, really. But we tend to use this strategy a lot more with our neurodivergent children. It certainly is used with children of all abilities, but I want to talk to you about how using these too much can be problematic and not great in the long run. First thing is, when you are using external motivation or an external reinforcer or a reward to motivate a child, What happens is you are inadvertently giving the message to that child that I know what I'm asking you to do is really not that exciting. I get it. I wouldn't want to do it either. But that's why you get this goodie if you do it. We're sending a message about the task that it's not exciting itself. And we know that you're going to need this to want to do it. And so what happens is they are just performing that task or that learning activity as a means to an end to get the reward. So that might mean that they're not giving it their full energy or effort. They're giving the minimal energy or effort just to get through it to get to the reward. That could be one drawback. Another drawback could be that they're not really deeply embedding the learning from that task because they really are only doing it as a way to get what they want. And then the problem is, once that reward is no longer available, are they still going to want to engage in that task or activity? Now, I know that in ABA and behavioral methodologies, there is a way of fading out reinforcers, and that is a part of the process, or increasing the amount of work that you require before giving the reinforcers. So that is the ABA's way to help prevent that dependency upon the reinforcers. But that's another problem as well, is that if we use these reinforcers too much and too frequently, and especially as the only way of motivating a child to do things, they become dependent upon them. And then what happens is we almost condition the child as they grow up that they don't know how to motivate themselves internally to do things without getting some sort of a reward at the end of the task. I see this with my autistic adults, that they have had years and years of behavioral therapy and they have been externally reinforced or rewarded for everything, and now it's becoming a hindrance of them becoming as independent as they could be in their life to perform those everyday mundane tasks that it takes to be an adult and just live a life, because they don't know how to motivate themselves without that external reward. It's not that you can't overcome that when you're at the adult age, but it just makes it that much more challenging. Another issue with using external rewards or reinforcers or bribes, again, I'm going to say it, is that there's like a belief or an intention that by using external motivation that it will help the child become more interested in the task at hand. Research shows that using external praise or reinforcement does not actually help increase internal motivation towards a task. In fact, if a child was already internally motivated to engage in that game or that activity or that learning task, and then they're offered a reward for that same task that they were already internally motivated to do, their inner drive and internal motivation to participate in that game or task or learning activity will decrease, because now they've been offered a reward and it just becomes a means to an end to get the goodie. These things are very problematic in the long run. It doesn't facilitate, like I said, long-term embedded learning through the learning process. Children become dependent upon them, and this dependency can impact them later on in life to become as independent as they possibly could be as adults. It can reduce their internal motivation to want to participate in the activities that they're being externally rewarded for. And you're actually sending a message to your child that what you want them to participate in, whatever that might be, a game, task, activity, learning activity, is not that interesting, because that's why I have to offer you this reward. So, what can we do instead? Before we get into how you can help facilitate your child's internal motivation to participate in activities or chores or learning tasks throughout the day, let's talk about how we don't necessarily need to throw the baby out of the bath water and not never use reinforcers at all. I'm just asking you to use them more sparingly and more mindfully. So, here are some ways that you can minimize the effects of using rewards or extrinsic motivation. Number one, use it as the exception, not the rule. You probably have been taught, if you are a family that has come from ABA or is currently participating in ABA or using some other form of behavioral teaching, that that is the way to motivate your child. And that is what you're using to motivate your child almost all the time consistently. So we want to phase that back and use it as the exception, not the rule. Use it at times where it's like maybe you're really short on time and you really need to get your child out the door. And you're like, okay, I'm pulling this out of my tool bag. Like, here, you can have the iPad if you get your shoes on right now, sort of thing. And that's okay. Sometimes as parents, you need to do that. Life is busy, life is hectic. We have things to do, but try to just use it as the exception instead of the rule. Another thing you can do to minimize the negative impact of using external motivation is to make the rewards less visible. So instead of presenting the reward at right up front, which is what we're taught to do a lot with autistic students, is you say, okay, what are we working for? Oh, you're going to work for the iPad. Okay, let's see. We're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you get your iPad. So instead of announcing it like that, you can give the iPad at the end of the activity as a surprise. Your child is then not engaging in the activity simply as the means to an end to get to the iPad. They're doing the activity because they want to please you, they want to participate, they're doing what they're told, whatever the case may be, but they participate in the activity and they're focused on giving it their best quality effort because they're not doing it for the promise of a reward. Then when you give the reward at the end and they're not expecting it, it has less of a negative impact overall on the quality of the child's experience while they're doing the task. The other thing that you can do is make the rewards as similar to the task as possible. So, if the reward itself is somehow just a natural consequence of the child participating in the activity, then that's the best thing possible. So, for example, if your child really loves like crashing down blocks or crashing into things, you may be doing an activity where you build a tower of cardboard blocks together, and then the payoff is they get to run and crash into it and knock it down. That's They know that that's going to happen at the end, and maybe they're motivated at that end point of the activity, but it's a natural part of the activity. So he has to really be engaged in the building of that tower in order to get to the payoff of knocking it down. Another example of offering a reward that's similar to the activity is offering your child a really cool bookmark for reading a new book. And maybe the bookmark has like their favorite character, or it's like, one of those bookmarks that visually has some sort of visual effect when you turn it in the lights. I'm like holographic. That's the word I was looking for. Maybe it's holographic, and they really love that because that's part of their like visual stimming that they really enjoy. Getting the bookmark is part of reading the book because they can use their cool bookmark to put it in the pages. Or maybe if you're going grocery shopping, part of the reward for helping you check off the list is they get to pick a special snack. It's closely related to the activity, as opposed to saying, oh, here you go, you get to play with the iPad because you read your book. When it's something completely not related at all, that is not going to minimize the effect. Another thing you can do is give your child choice in how the rewards will be delivered. For example, let's say you are giving some sort of an allowance for chores to be done at home. Have your child have some sort of say over how much each chore is worth, or what chores go on the chore chart, which chores they think are the ones that are like, oh, I really don't like to do these. I think I should get paid to do these. Have them be a part of deciding what goes onto the chore chart. If you're working with a younger student, you could say something like, okay, how many math problems are we going to do today? and then have them choose, okay, so we'll do 3 and then we'll take a break. And then we'll do how many after that. If they're part of the process, they're also going to feel some autonomy and control over what you're asking them to do. And automatically, if they feel like they have more say over what they're doing, that's going to help increase their internal motivation because they now have some sort of autonomy over what they're doing. Other thing that is very, very, very important to do to minimize the effects of rewards is do not offer extrinsic motivation for something your child is already motivated to do. I'm going to say that again. Do not offer a reward to your child for something that they already willingly and happily do and are internally motivated to do. Because when you do that, research shows that you are going to be depressing their internal drive to do it without the reward. So definitely don't make those the exceptions to the rule of when you offer rewards if they're already doing it internally motivated. It's important to know that when we offer verbal praise to our children, that is a form of extrinsic motivation. It's social praise. If you're talking from a behavioral perspective, the highest level of reinforcement is social praise. And it's not that you can't use social praise with your child, but research does show that when children are overpraised, it decreases their ability to check in with themselves and to have a qualitative judgment on their own work themselves or how they're performing for themselves. It increases the need for them to constantly check in with an adult or an authority figure to get approval that what they're doing is okay. And that's a negative impact of overpraising a child, unfortunately. One of the things you can do is make sure that you give specific praise, or you can give attention without praise. So, for example, if your child is drawing a picture, and let's say they draw a tree, rather than saying, "Good job, great tree," you could say something like, "Oh, I see you made the leaves orange. I think this picture is from the fall." So you're just making a comment. There's no sort of qualitative judgment on the picture. You're just commenting on what the child drew, which gives the child feedback that you are paying attention to them. You see what they're doing. And really, that's what kids want, is our attention. And without saying whether or not what they did was good or bad, and they can decide for themselves the quality of their own work, if they're proud of their work or not, and without some adult giving them that praise. Or when you do give praise, make sure you're giving specific praise instead of saying, "Good job, good boy." Try never to say "good boy, good girl." We want to praise actions and behaviors, not people, because we don't want kids to get the impression that they're a bad boy or a bad girl if they make a wrong choice or they make a mistake. We don't want them afraid to make mistakes or to think that they are bad if they don't do the right thing 100% of the time. When we just say "good job," that doesn't really give any important feedback to the child. But when we give specific praise, like, "I really like how hard you're working. I could tell that that was really hard for you and you kept going. I'm so proud of you." That's very specific. You're praising the effort, you're acknowledging the struggle, and you're praising that they persisted past that struggle rather than just saying, "You did it, good job." And it doesn't really give much information to the child beyond that. Of course, you want to keep the praise genuine. We're not going to give fake flowery praise that we don't really mean. Kids see right through that. No matter the language abilities, no matter their abilities in general, kids see through that ish. So let's talk about how we can facilitate intrinsic motivation. And honestly, I have an entire workshop, hour and a half long workshop that I do on this very topic. So we're not going to be able to get into all the nitty-gritty of that right now, but I will just scratch the surface and tell you one of my number one ways to increase intrinsic motivation, especially with an autistic child or a neurodivergent child, is to embed their interest into the activity as much as you possibly can. So rather than taking what they love, taking what they're interested in, and holding it hostage as a reward. When you do this, you can get the thing that you love the most. let's find a way to put that into what they're doing already. Ways I've done this in the past. I was working with a student that he was having a really hard time understanding the concept of how many more. That was really challenging for him. And he wasn't a big fan of math because it's hard. And so we were working on that concept, and I was using bar graphs to help demonstrate it visually how many more. And I took bar graphs from like generic educational sheets, and I erased the generic labels on the bar graphs that were like fruits or vegetables or I don't know, something lame, right? But instead, this particular student really loves 90s music. So I put the names of 90s artists, pop artists in the graph. So I would put Christina Aguilera, Britney Spears, NSYNC, Backstreet Boys. And when I presented him this bar graph and he saw that, he was like, what? Oh my, he thought it was hysterical to see those names on the bar graph. And he was automatically more interested in figuring out how to read this bar graph because it was about a topic that he was really, really interested in. I did another one with Pokemon characters, and we used Pokemon characters as the subject of the bar graph. For a younger child, sometimes it can be as simple as incorporating their favorite character into what they're doing, like giving them a pencil with Thomas on it, if they're a Thomas fan, to do their work with. Sometimes that can be motivating enough, like, "Ooh, I love Thomas. I'm going to do this because I love using my Thomas pencil." It sometimes can be as easy as that. It isn't always, for sure. Another example, I had a child that was very active. He was not one to want to sit in a chair and do tabletop type of work. And he had a goal to receptively identify pictures. And he really loved this ball track that I had. It's this wooden ball track that has 3 wooden balls, and it had this really cool trampoline feature that the balls would bounce off of. And he loved it. So what I did was I took those balls from the ball track and I took 3 red solo cups and I turned them upside down. And I took one of the balls and I put it under a cup, and I would go round and round and round we go. Where it stops, nobody knows. And I would purposely put the target picture that I wanted him to identify on the cup with the ball. And then I would put 2 other pictures on the other cups. And let's just say the label was cat. I'd be like, okay, where's the cat? All of a sudden, this student who could have cared less about this activity, if I were to just present it as a boring tabletop task, all of a sudden he is looking and discriminating visually between those pictures. And boom, there's the cat, because he knew that's where the ball was going to be. And I would pick up the cup and he gets the ball, and then he went to go play on the ball track. This is also another example of keeping the reward. It's a little bit of both intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, because he found the ball and then he got to play with his toy once he found the ball, and then he had to come back to find the next ball to play with the toy again. But remember what I said, we can minimize the negative effects of the extrinsic rewards if the reward is most related to the activity. The ball was part of the hiding the ball game, and when he found the ball, he got to put it on the track, which he loved. So it was very closely associated with what we were already doing. And the thing is, it's not easy. It's a lot easier to take what your child is interested in and hold it as a reward, dangle it as a carrot. And like, if you do this, you get this. It is a lot easier to do it that way. And it does take some time, some thinking, some creativity to embed the interest into an activity, for sure. But it is so worth the effort, because in the long run, it means that your child will embed that skill in deep learning into their brain because they were intrinsically attending to what they were doing. And they are more likely to generalize what they learned and keep that learning because they were internally motivated to learn it. Also, they are going to become less dependent upon needing rewards as they get older, which will help them be more self-motivated as an adult, which is what they really need to be as independent as possible as an adult. I hope I have fully imparted upon you the importance to think about what kinds of rewards you use, and how you motivate your child, and why it's important to try to do it in a new way to facilitate that intrinsic motivation as much as possible, especially for our autistic children, because it really is so much better for their learning and for them as a person in the long run. If you are interested in a deeper dive on this topic, I highly recommend the book Punished by Rewards by Alfie Kahn. As always, I will put that in the description for this video. It goes into not just how extrinsic motivation impacts use with children, and he doesn't just focus it specifically on autistic children. He also talks about it for children in general, but he also goes into how this impacts us as a society in the workplace as well. So I highly recommend looking into that book if you are interested in a really deep dive on the topic. It's jam-packed with research, and it is the thing that really reshaped my perspective on behaviorism and using rewards as a motivator for children. Even though I just naturally always had a propensity towards embedding my students' interest into the work that I did with them, I still came from a behaviorally trained background, so I was still using extrinsic motivation quite a bit in the work that I did. But it really did reshape my thought process on it. So I highly recommend that book. I hope you love what you learned today, and I would love to hear if you have questions about how you could embed your child's interest into an activity. Let me know below in the comments. I'd be happy to give you some suggestions. And what did you learn today? What surprised you? And how are you going to use intrinsic motivation with your child? All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you soon. Bye.